Friends, I just pressed the Let's Go Live button, which means we've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the interwebs before we go ahead and get started. Got to make sure those tubes are working. And it looks like they're booting up right on time on YouTube, on Locals, on Rumble, on Telegram. Let's get going, shall we? They're working. That's tremendous news. We can go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live, the show that spotlights misconduct involving police, prosecutors, and politicians. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney, and today we're talking about Jack Smith and what's going on there at the United States Supreme Court. We've got a big case that we've been covering here, of course, the Trump immunity saga. This stems out of the January 6th case in Judge Chutkan's courtroom out of Washington, D.C. We're asking ourselves, is this trial going to happen before the election? And the Supreme Court is going to be weighing in on some pretty important issues. One, of course, is about presidential immunity. But we're asking for a stay right now. The Supreme Court is considering kind of whether to delay the Trump trial or to stay the Trump trial, or whether to grant petition for certiorari and to hear the claim and maybe even dispose of the case by finding that there is presidential immunity. We don't really know, but former Attorney General Edwin Meese and two law professors, we've been covering these three and their argument for some time here on our channel. They submitted yet another amicus brief into the Supreme Court. And this one is saying we can't have a trial in the Judge Chutkan case in the J6 prosecution until we clear this issue up. Is Jack Smith properly qualified to be the special counsel in the first place? Because remember, he was not appointed by the president. He's not a U.S. attorney. He was not confirmed by the Senate. And so they just kind of pulled him out of the International Criminal Court at The Hague and said, why don't you come over here and be our special prosecutor? But the special prosecutor statutes don't really cover that. They say you got to be appointed properly and confirmed by the Senate. And so they say a stay has to be granted, or you got to resolve this issue, right? It's a critical threshold issue. Jack Smith needs to be disqualified, and we're at the Supreme Court making that argument. Now, we're also going to see in our second segment that Trump and his defense may actually be bringing this up in future filings. So we're going to, of course, look over to what's happening in the classified documents case, but they're going to be hinting that they got a whole slew of motions coming down the pike, and one of those motions may be a motion to disqualify Jack Smith. But before we get there, we're going to hear from the governor of Georgia. Of course, his name is Brian Kemp. He kind of gives a dumb answer in this clip that I have here from him. He sat down with Caitlin Collins, and he says, when asked a very important question about Trump's case, he says, Trump is not immune, but his legal analysis is a little bit wanting. And so we're going to see what he says there, all in that first segment. Then we are turning our attention to what's happening in Florida, because there is a lot coming down the pike. Trump's team said tomorrow, my friends, so make sure you're subscribed here so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. He said we might be filing maybe as many as 10 new substantive motions in the classified documents case. And we've been like, waiting for these, just been kind of like doing one of these things. Any day now, we're waiting for these. But we knew they were coming because we saw a lot of this stuff in the January 6th case, talking about presidential immunity and vindictive prosecution and all the other things. So that is coming down the line. And one of those motions should be that Jack Smith is not properly appointed and he must be disqualified. Now, we're talking about classified documents. They said that Trump took these documents because he was selling them to, I guess, international terrorists or something, and that Trump is a Putin stooge, which is the new meme. We're on season 3 of this TV show, and the first season was terrible. Second season was even worse. Now we're on season 3. They're like, you got to cancel the show already, but they have nothing else. There's nothing else they can write. The Hollywood writers in their brains are all overdosed. So they don't have any real capacity to talk about anything else other than Russia, Russia, Russia. And so Dan Goldman is out here along with Jamie Raskin, and they're pushing this new meme because the fake DOJ indicted another, fake intelligence agent. And so they're saying all of this is all rigged, and they're just screaming from the rooftops that we're back in this, Russia 3.0 now. Nancy Mace is going to come out and say this is 2 tiers of justice. And all of this is just a political battle, which, of course, is what we're in. The DOJ is being used to prosecute political opponents of the state including the people that make them look bad, and that's where we're at. So we'll see what Nancy Mace says about that in segment 2, and then we're going over to learn a little bit more about Tishy Letitia. Remember that face of hers where she said, illegitimate president, where her face was kind of spasming out? That was a long time ago when she was running for the position. Now she, of course, has the position. And she says that, if Donald Trump doesn't pay his bills on time, we're going to seize his property. And so a lot of the lefties who get a little bit self-indulgent with their Trump coverage, I don't know, they watch it like late at night, they turn the lights off, it's weird. But they were very excited over this because Tishy came out and said that she might seize his properties if he doesn't pay. And we're like, you just issued the order like on Friday. Whack jobs, relax, okay? He's figuring it out. You just hit him with $500 million, you communist whack jobs. So he's trying to figure it out. She's out here, creating new content for her only Tishes. All of them, the media, just, subscribe, disgusting. But what Trump's team said in response is, there's a proper form that you have to go through before you just issue a judgment. And so Trump's attorneys sent in a letter back over to Engoron, and they said, hey, Engoron, you kind of done goofed here, man. Why don't you give us an opportunity to talk about the form of the judgment, because the rules say you're supposed to consider our input before you go through with all this stuff. Of course, Engoron didn't do any of that. So we'll see what Trump's attorney said in the Tishy case. We've also got Kevin O'Leary. Man, we played a clip, I think, from him 2 days ago, and he was fired up back then, but he's even more fired up now. Once I think he realizes what the impact of this decision is. And, we can't underemphasize this enough. This is the state threatening to seize his property. Okay, first of all, they're doing that already with a $500 million fine, but then they're just going to say, we're just going to take your property. And we get lectured all the time about how we don't want to turn into Putinville, where it's going to be, communists coming over and taking over our buildings and our property. We have property rights in America. Not anymore. Okay, Tishy's in charge. So Kevin O'Leary is recognizing that this is a big problem. And Trump, to his credit, he's saying, yeah, well, there's going to be revenge, but you know what the revenge is going to be? Success. Very Trump to say, a lot of other people be like, we're going to burn it down. He's like, how about we just make it better than ever? Very Trump. I don't know why the left doesn't get it. Join on Team Trump. It's not too late. So we've got 3 great segments to attend to today, my friends. It's a beautiful Wednesday. I hope your week is unfolding very nicely. It's all downhill from here. Tomorrow's Thursday, and then the day after that is Friday. And speaking of Thursday, we got some cool stuff happening tomorrow at watcherlodge.com. I really want to invite you to come join us. I think this stuff is really important. My friend Mike Volz is going to be joining us. Tomorrow is the day for our food sovereignty workshop at watcherlodge.com. It's free. We're not going to sell you anything or pitch you anything. Just come and join us because he is a smart dude. He's put a lot of thought into building his food supply. He's influenced me and how, I build my food supply before I lost it all in that boating accident. And he's going to share with you some of the greatest tips that, like do this now, do this now, do this now. So it's taking place tomorrow. It's free. We're doing it on Zoom. And hopefully you come and join us. Hopefully bring your notepad, take your notes, open up your Evernote file, your Notion file, fill that puppy up because it's going to be a lot of fun at watcherlodge.com. Links are in the description below. Next week, the following week, we got my friend Jason Campbell's going to come join us, talk about political Zen wellness. We're going to get our minds fortified and cleared out so we can be stronger and more sovereign and free. Watcherlodge.com. It is our self-development and sovereignty community, and we're having a lot of fun there, so come and join us there. Also, any PDFs that you want that we're about to go through today, you can find those at robertgovea.com, also linked in the description. And that's where you'll find our newsletter. Sign up for our newsletter. So if you missed the show, get all the stuff just summarized, delivered to your inbox. That way you don't have to listen to me, rant and rave for 2.5 hours. Just read it. And then Locals. We went backwards today. Locals, okay, is our members-only community where we do streams in the morning, we do streams on Saturday, and we do an after party as soon as the show's over here. We go over to Locals, we debrief over there, and we have a great community. A lot of fun people, and so we'd love to have you join us. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We're talking about the election stuff, 2024, Joe Biden falling upstairs still again, right? All the other stuff that we can't get to here is where we talk about it. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We'd love to have you. All right, now, and my friends, thank you for supporting all the things we do. You make this all possible. So let's get to it, my friends, because we've got an Ed Meese filing to read through, and you know how much we love those here. I can't help myself. What can we say? Hey, and I want to shout out our doc master on Locals, Elliot, for flagging these documents for us yesterday. Very, very nice. And Locals has the best chat in the whole world. And the best looking people too, including Rocky Water, very handsome. All right, let's get to it, my friends. Jack Smith must be disqualified. That is what former Attorney General Ed Meese says at the Supreme Court. Now, we've already gone through some Ed Meese filings before, and they're great. Why? Because they say that all of this should go away because Jack Smith has been illegally appointed. He was not appointed by the president, Joe Biden. He was not confirmed by the Senate. And the rules say before you have a special counsel, you got to go through the proper appointment mechanisms. And so Ed Meese, along with two other law professors who are very smart and intelligent individuals, they've sent this in to the Supreme Court. And this case is on appeal from Judge Chutkan's courtroom. And they're saying, look, Supreme Court, you have to grant a stay in the lower level case, or you got to dismiss this case. You got to resolve this because Jack Smith is illegitimate and the case can't be prosecuted by an illegitimate prosecutor. All of the prosecution power emanates from this individual to do their due diligence. They swear and all the things. And he's illegal. So it's got to go. And they're making this known to the Supreme Court. We'll see what the Supreme Court says about it. And we'll also hear from Brian Kemp, who talked about what he thinks about Trump's immunity, which of course is the issue in SCOTUS. So let's jump right into the filing. You see, this is a very important case in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. A historic issue about presidential immunity being litigated now. And Trump has already petitioned the Supreme Court for a stay. They want the lower level court to hold off on giving this trial back to Judge Chutkan so she can get the trial back on track because they want to convict Trump before the election. They're saying, hold off on this. We want to go back down and appeal this thing to the en banc bench of the entire Court of Appeals and have them all hear it and have them render a verdict before it comes back down to the Supreme Court, or maybe it's dismissed entirely. So hold off, they say. And Jack Smith does not want that to happen. But now this is from very intelligent individuals, including a former Attorney General of the United States. His name is Edwin Meese III. Also, law professors are Stephen Calabresi and Gary Lawson. And they are, again, filing in support of Trump. They're saying, Your Honor, this is all illegal. Former AG. And they put this together for us, detailing the table of authorities, lots of authority from these three. And here's what they argue in front of the 9 judges to the court as friends of the court, amici curiae. We're friends of the court submitting this in support of Trump. They say, Supreme Court, let it be known that Jack Smith does not have authority to conduct the prosecution underlying this case. Sorry, Jack. Those actions of prosecuting a case can only be taken by persons properly appointed as federal officers to properly created federal offices. And remember how much they freak out about officers and offices in the Trump impeachment question under the 14th Amendment question for insurrection. He's an officer, therefore the 14th Amendment applies to him, therefore he can be disqualified under the 14th Amendment from being placed on the ballots. Okay, remember how much they freak out about this. Now, we're not talking about the president here, which is in its own unique position. We're talking about Jack Smith. So special counsel has to be a properly appointed officer in a properly appointed office. But neither Jack Smith, they say, nor the position of the special counsel under which he purportedly acts meets those criteria. And that is a serious problem for the rule of law. Whatever one may think of former President Trump or the conduct that Smith challenges in the underlying case. They say, Your Honor, Supreme Court judges, the illegality that addressed in this brief that we're talking about here today, it started back in November of 2022. You remember the date. When Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's hitman for the DOJ, when Merrick Garland exceeded his legal authority and he purported to take Jack Smith and appoint him as special counsel for the DOJ. He didn't have the right to do that. Smith was appointed according to the appointment order. They're referencing that document that Garland released. They say Smith was appointed to conduct the ongoing investigation into whether any person or entity, including Trump, violated the law in connection with the effort to interfere with the lawful transition of power, blah, blah, blah. That was held on January 6th. Okay, so Merrick Garland came out, filled this out. He's appointed. There you go. Nobody really paid much attention to it. Now, Merrick Garland cited in that memo these different provisions of the law, 28 U.S. Code 509, 510, 515, 533. But nobody paid much attention to those, okay, other than these law professors and AG Meese. Shout out. They said, but none of those statutes, so he says, I have the authority under these statutes to appoint Jack Smith, but none of those statutes, nor any other statutory or constitutional provision, remotely authorize the appointment by the Attorney General of a private citizen, who's Jack, to receive extraordinary criminal law enforcement power under the title of special counsel. You can't just go pick out some Joe Schmo, somebody who hasn't gone through a proper vetting procedure, meaning they were appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Now they have a footnote for us here. They say no party or counsel for party authored this brief, and no entity aside from us made any monetary contribution towards the preparation or the submission of this brief. So Trump's not paying us for this, neither is anyone else. So Supreme Court, they'd say, let us explain why Jack Smith is illegitimate. Here's point number one. First, the Appointments Clause under the Constitution, it says this, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. It says all federal offices not otherwise provided for in the Constitution must be established by law. That's verbatim. And there is no statute, meaning law, establishing the office of the special counsel in the DOJ. Okay, so they just made it up. He cited a bunch of other stuff. So if the Constitution, in other words, doesn't explicitly say it exists, then you got to have a law to say it exists. It makes pretty logical sense, unless you're Merrick Garland. Now, the statutory provisions relied upon, meaning these statutes, 510, 15, 33, and 509, that they rely on, they say that's our authority for Jack, and lower courts, all of them and lower courts have appointed special counsels. They do not authorize the creation and the appointment of special counsels at the level of the U.S. attorney. Okay, so in other words, they've just been creating this out of thin air. There is no statutory basis for it. But everybody's just been kind of looking the other way at it. It's like, well, it's the DOJ. They're not going to, in other giant government bureaucracies and institutions, they interpret the rules to give them more power than they have. And Congress is, useless. So what are they going to do? And if the DOJ is, running roughshod and exploiting this, they don't want to be the subject of some special counsel investigation, so they can just do it. So United States versus Nixon does not hold to the contrary. They say there's other case law that they rely on for that, but they say that's not valid. It's not a valid case because no question was ever raised in that case about the validity of that counsel's appointment. So in other words, they cite this case to say, we have authority. States versus Nixon allowed us to do it. But they say, but that was a whole separate issue. There was no actual issue about the appointment of counsel in that case. So don't say that it's related, right? They may have talked about it, but it's not controlling. It's not, necessary to the holding. And second, former AG Edwin Meese says to SCOTUS, even if one overlooks the absence of statutory authority for the position, say, okay, maybe it's not specific, there is no statute specifically authorizing the Attorney General, rather than the President, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to appoint a special counsel. So, anyways, continuing, they say under the Appointments Clause, inferior officers can be appointed by department heads only if Congress so directs by statute. Constitution says that, and so directs specifically enough to overcome a clear statement presumption in favor of presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation. So no such statute exists for them, right? There are clear rules. They're not identifying it, and they can't identify it because it doesn't exist. Now, third, the special counsel, if he is a valid officer, is a principal officer rather than an inferior officer, and thus cannot be appointed without senatorial confirmation regardless of what any statutes say. So remember, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. We see at times when statutes conflict with the Constitution, and generally Congress will write the statute. They'll say, we have the right to do this and that, and then somebody will file a lawsuit. No, you don't. And the courts will say it's out of alignment with the Constitution. It's therefore unconstitutional. So if Congress, passes these statutes, which we referenced earlier, so let's remember where we're at in the law. Congress is using 28 U.S. Code and these different provisions. So they're saying, these statutes give us power. But if those statutes conflict with the Constitution, then no, they don't. So they say this is true as a matter of original meaning, even true as a matter of case law. These other cases can plausibly be read to say that any person who is in any fashion subordinate to another executive officer other than the president is an inferior officer. And such a reading of these decisions leads to ludicrous results that there is only one non-inferior officer in every executive department. So they say, to be sure, now there are times when the appointment of a special counsel is appropriate. Okay, you can do this, like you can have special counsel. And the statutes and the Constitution provide ample means for those appointments. How do we do it? Easy. We just use existing United States attorneys. For example, Patrick Fitzgerald, he was the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. He was appointed as by the then acting Attorney General to investigate the Valerie Plame leak, right, with Dick Cheney. Now, which occurred within the District of Columbia. So he was already a U.S. Attorney. Just go get someone. Fitzgerald was a Senate-confirmed officer of the United States. He prosecuted Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby. Other recent examples include John Huber and John Durham, who were already U.S. attorneys, lawfully appointed. Now, what the statutes and constitutions do not allow, however, is for Merrick Garland to go and just pick some private citizen who was never confirmed by the Senate as a substitute U.S. attorney under the title special counsel. Just go pluck someone out from the international. Hey, do you hate Trump? Perfect. Come on over back to America. As happened here, which is what they did. Now, that appointment of Jack Smith was unlawful, as are all the legal actions that have flowed from it, including Smith's prosecution of Trump. He had no root power. He had no authority to even begin, convening a grand jury. So everything that happened based on unlawful authority has to go. The whole case has to go. And AG Meese and these law professors, right, they say, look, Supreme Court, given their interest in and the demonstrated commitment to the rule of law, the legal issues this brief addresses is particularly important to amici, us. The Honorable Ed Meese III, he was the 75th AG of the United States. He was counselor to the president. And now he's Ronald Reagan's distinguished fellow emeritus at the Heritage Foundation. Now, during his tenure as AG, the DOJ steadfastly defended proper limits on federal power. We don't want the DOJ to give themselves more power. This statute kind of says that we can do whatever we want. Perfect. Let's make that happen. Professors Calabresi and Lawson, they're scholars of original public meaning of the Constitution, and Citizens United Foundation are dedicated to restoring government to the people by promoting federalism, free enterprise, individual liberty, and limited government. And we don't want the DOJ to continue to gobble up additional power that is not theirs. So here's what they tell us. In front of the Supreme Court, Ed Meese says, Your Honors, the legality of so-called special counsel Smith's appointment, it must be conclusively resolved before the trial. So Supreme Court, you have to stay this case and resolve this issue before you don't stay this case and send it back down to Chutkan's courtroom for trial. They say the legality of Jack Smith's appointment is potentially a fatal flaw in this entire prosecution. And as such, it must be resolved before this case proceeds to trial back with Chutkan. That reality alone warrants a stay by this court. So you can pause it while we address this. And an order directing the lower courts to address this issue expeditiously. So SCOTUS, tell them you're on hold and you want this issue briefed and you want a ruling on this from the lower courts, specifically the Court of Appeals, address this issue. Do you even have jurisdiction to hear this case if Jack Smith is illegitimate? The answer is no, you don't. The whole thing needs to go. Now they say, although this court could itself reach this issue now, of course, it's Supreme Court. They could just say, yeah, good. They could say, good point. You're right. Jack Smith, you're illegitimate. Get out of here. They say, hold off though, Supreme Court. Supreme Court should wait for the lower courts to opine in the first instance, right? Let them hash it out. There's a beautiful thing about the adversarial process in American law. for all its faults. The adversarial process is both sides are very self-interested. Government wants to, go for a conviction. I think they have a little too much, well, a lot too much of a enthusiasm for it these days. But, they should be wanting to do justice. And so they're motivated to convict. The defense is motivated to acquit. Through that, you get some justice sometimes, right? You get to some truth because both sides are fighting in their own interests. Madison talked about this, I think, in Federalist 51. The way to get a society with self-interested, very even selfish people is by pitting ambition against ambition. Iron sharpens iron. Both sides get stronger when you're attacking each other a bit. So you are then able to come to some level of truth. So let the lower level courts hash this out. Let's see what the DOJ says about this in Chutkan's courtroom. Let's see what Jack Smith says. I am legitimate. I'm a real boy. The court, they say, has expressly included appointments clause objections in the category of non-jurisdictional structural constitutional objections that could be considered on appeal whether or not they were ruled upon below. So in other words, just because nobody raised this case, because nobody came out here and said Jack Smith is illegitimate, like in other words, Trump didn't make this argument, you can still rule on it because it's a jurisdictional thing. In other words, it could solve the whole thing. And so we don't want to waste our time on talking about issues when there's one threshold issue that hasn't even been decided yet. In this case, however, prudence dictates that the court should wait because this is a court of review, not of first view. Nice alliteration there. This is a court of review, not of first view. It is generally unwise to consider arguments in the first instance. And they say, by the way, the implications of the appointments clause issue here, Your Honors, in the Supreme Court, is nothing short of historic. And the court would benefit from allowing both the district courts currently handling the prosecutions of the former president, that's Trump, in the District of Columbia and the Southern District of Florida, where Jack Smith is presiding over both cases, to examine the issue and give the losing party the opportunity to be heard by the D.C. Circuit, the Court of Appeals there, and the 11th Circuit, respectively. So in other words, send this back down to the first layer courts in Judge Chutkan's courtroom in D.C., in Judge Cannon's courtroom in Florida. Let them hash this out. Okay, Jack Smith thinks he's so legitimate. He can make his claim there, right? Make his position known. Verify that he is someone who is apparently lawfully appointed, even though he's a private citizen, never confirmed by the Senate, never appointed by the president. And he's got a lot of power to just do whatever he wants, right? As someone who brings criminal charges against the former president. So he's got a lot of power. He's his own little DOJ. So they say if we go that route and you give it back to them, it is highly likely that all those courts will examine the issue on an expedited basis, because if they find that Jack Smith's illegitimate, then he's got to go. Now, imagine what would happen if we had a split on this, okay? How fun would that be? Oh, I can just see it now. It goes back down to Chutkan. She's like, Jack Smith is a real boy. Yeah. And, she, gives him an apple or something. And then Cannon says, no. You're totally illegitimate. Go back to The Hague. And we have a circuit split. Now SCOTUS has to rectify and solve these things. This is especially true because the reason summarized in this brief, the law as articulated by this court, is sufficiently clear that it should not take the lower courts long to invalidate Smith's appointment. So it's going to be an easy question, by the way. Like once this lands on Chutkan's desk, even she's going to see very clearly that Jack Smith has got to go. So for that matter, they say Supreme Court, this question should be resolved even prior to Judge Chutkan resolving any claim of immunity asserted by Trump. So remember, we're at the Supreme Court now talking about presidential immunity. Does Trump have it? They tied this back to Marbury versus Madison and the idea of separation of powers. The courts can't sit in judgment of the president's official acts. Otherwise, the court is the president. Okay, Liz Cheney in Congress can't sit in judgment of the president's act and say, he should have made a phone call. Okay, otherwise, she's the president. So no one cares what she says. So that's the point. But before we even get to that issue, okay, we don't even, and that's a big question about presidential immunity and all these things. Shouldn't the person bringing the charges in the first place be legitimate before we even, start going down this line? So Trump he should not need to assert any defense in the first place. Why is it his burden to bring up a presidential immunity defense when the prosecution in the first place is illegitimate? He shouldn't even have to talk about immunity. Immunity, he's being charged by Jack. And for that reason, they say, amici, we will promptly present their material, that's us, the friends of the court submitting this filing, former AG, to the relevant trial courts. Very nice of them. They say, no, don't even worry about it. We'll send him a copy of our prior filings. We'll get him up to speed. We'll send Chutkan everything she needs to know. We'll even highlight it. We know how much she likes highlighters. So that the district judges can rule on this issue with dispatch and in posture that is procedurally correct. Now, amici, that's us, therefore expect that this court, the Supreme Court, will be squarely presented with this issue in very short order. And you, Supreme Court, will have the benefit of percolation in the lower courts. And I happen to love that word. I love when things percolate, you know, especially here on the channel. I got a lot of things percolating here. A lot of cases we're watching are percolating all over the place. So for these reasons, this court, the Supreme Court, in the meantime, should not treat the current stay application as an actual petition for certiorari. So Trump's team basically said two things in the original petition and the application for a stay. There were two things. One, Your Honor, Supreme Court, you don't need to hear the issue about presidential immunity. Just accept our stay. Tell the lower level courts, don't give the case back to Chutkan to put on the trial docket and the trial calendar again, and allow us to appeal to the full Court of Appeals en banc in the DC Circuit. And if the court does that, then the trial is stayed. Then they can re-appeal to the Court of Appeals, the full panel, get their ruling on it, and then things can, work their way up to the Supreme Court again if necessary. So they're saying, don't, Supreme Court, that's definitely the way that you should think about this, is give it back down to the lower court. Don't accept it as a petition. That was Trump's backup plan. He's saying, look, if you're not going to grant a stay on the lower level court, in the alternative, accept Supreme Court our petition for certiorari, and then issue a ruling on the ultimate immunity issue and get that scheduled for oral arguments and all the things. So we're still waiting on a response from SCOTUS, but they say treat it as a stay. Now, the court should instead, SCOTUS, follow the normal procedure under Supreme Court rules. Don't have to do anything fancy here. They're the ones out of DC who are trying to accelerate this to make everyone go very fast. But just follow the rules, they say. That should allow ample time for the lower courts, like Chutkan and the DC Circuit, to first rule on the Appointments Clause issue. Is Jack Smith properly appointed, yes or no? Presented by the prosecutions that are currently led by Smith. And if necessary, we can also have subsequent review of that question in this court. So let him brief it, let him duke it out at the lower level, and then we'll see it back here. Now, they say also, Your Honors, Supreme Court, we want to be crystal clear about this. Jack Smith's designation as special counsel, it violates the Constitution and the Appointments Clause. Why? Smith's lack of authority to prosecute Trump, it follows from first principles. Let's just go back to blank slate. Let's just see how this works. In our constitutional system, it's pretty obvious. Congress alone has the authority to create federal offices that are not established by the Constitution. The Constitution says it exists, it exists. Otherwise, Congress gets to create it. That's the legislative body. You don't want the president to just create a bazillion new offices for himself. I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and no. So the Attorney General also cannot ex nihilo fashion offices as he sees fit. Okay, so the executive branch, you have a Department of Justice, they don't also just go to create, we needed a department of this, and another one, and another one. And so nor has Congress ever given the Attorney General power to appoint a special counsel of this nature. So the executive branch fills the jobs that Congress creates. They set, we have an open position here. Great, we'll fill them. They never created Jack Smith's office or one of his nature. And so thus, without legally holding any office, because it doesn't exist, Smith cannot wield the authority of the United States, including his present attempt to prosecute a former president. And that alone, SCOTUS, is a powerful reason to grant the present application for a stay. Only Congress can create a federal office, not Merrick Garland and Jack Smith and Joe Biden. The Constitution vests executive power in the president. Constitution says so. And then it says that the power to create federal offices goes to Congress under the Necessary and Proper Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. Says Congress has the exclusive power to create federal offices. The law professors wrote about that. Steve Gallibresi and Gary Lawson. Shout out to these two. And they're citing other cases. Now, English monarchs, right, like basically would be the executive branch, they could create offices, but the founders consciously denied that to the president. Could you imagine if Joe Biden could just create offices? Oh, gosh. What would we have? Office of the ice cream, probably band stairs, you know, all sorts of stuff. But he'd turn it into, like, whatever he wanted. We have a billion more bureaucracies and institutions. So they took that away specifically. Now, so they just give it to Congress. Congress does it. Now, accordingly, the Constitution does not give the president or department heads power to create any offices or appoint whatever officers that they deem appropriate. Instead, it requires that Congress first create all the offices to which they appoint the federal officers. Okay, Congress creates the offices, and then federal officers can be appointed, okay? And there's two types of officers, whether they're principal or inferior. Now, the Appointments Clause confirms this, and it provides for the appointment of officers, as we see, which are established by law, and law is Congress. The framers emphasized the phrase in 1787. They said that plain import of law is statute. That means Congress. That's capital L, law. Consistently in the Constitution. And so if there is no statute, then there is no law, and there is no office to which someone can be appointed. We're following the bouncing ball. And there is no office. It doesn't exist. And here, no statute that exists authorizes the appointment of Jack Smith. The Department of Justice and their current statutory structure that they're relying on, it includes this. An attorney general, this is what the law says, right? The statute. You get one AG. You get one deputy AG, and you get various other offices, not including more than 100,000 DOJ employees, right? And the vast majority of federal workers, including those at the DOJ, are not officers of the United States. They're just employees, and their appointments are not governed by the Appointment Clause. And therefore, they do not require specific statutory authorization because they're employees. Now, for their appointments, it suffices to provide, as Congress has done. Congress has said this: each executive agency may employ such number of employees, okay, because Congress wrote that in the statute, of various classes recognized as may be appropriate. But officer positions, okay, not employees, officer positions must specifically be established by law. And Congress can't undo that, even if they want to, okay? We know they dump all over the Constitution every chance they get, but Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 says it. So employees then cannot exercise the powers of officers. So we're being clear here. Now, we also had this in 1978, the Ethics in Government Act. It added into this mix. It said, okay, officers, offices, we have employees, and you can't just create these things out of thin air. Congress has to specifically provide for them. They did in Section 3101. That's why we have employees. But if we had a special counsel statute, we'd see another statute for this, and we're going to not see that as we go on. So they say back in 1978, the Ethics in Government Act added this other thing called independent counsel. And you've heard this get confused oftentimes in the media. They'll say he's independent counsel and say, actually, no, he's not. That's old. Like you're thinking about this. You're remembering back, 20 years ago. Appointed, they added in this a special 3-judge court upon referral by the AG. But the statute for this independent counsel, that all expired back in 1999, okay? Congress created a new office, independent counsel, and then it expired. So that's all dead. Now, shortly before that expiration, Attorney General Janet Reno, remember her, she promulgated regulations which, if valid, are still in force today. So she just wrote this out of her, derriere. She pulled it right out of there and provided for an office of special counsel. And what they did is, you see this here, 28 CFR, these are called Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR. So we have the statutes, which are the law, Congress passes that, they read it, like the 1,000-page bills that we all get, whatever. And there's a bunch of garbage in there. But even as big and disgusting as those bills are, they still don't have a lot of rules about how those apply and how the application and the interpretation of the rules are. Like you probably have stuff, similar stuff, like there's stuff that you do when you're working, and then there's kind of an explanation of the things that you do when you're working. So you're kind of doing the things, and there's rules about how to do the things, but it's not actually the thing. And so there's layers to all of this, right? How do you implement? That's what the Code of Federal Regulations are. So there was no statute. Now, under these regulations, which they modify, Joe Biden's modifying them again to waive student loans, and we're just changing the rules, right, of the statute. We're not changing the statute because Congress can only do that. So we're just adjusting the rules a little bit and how they apply. So Reno pulled this one out, said under these regulations, she said, the Attorney General may, in some circumstances, she pulled this one, says appoint an outside special counsel to assume responsibility for this matter, and wrote those in the rules. Now, the regulations clarify that outside means someone from outside the United States government. That's in the regs. Now, the Reno regulations, like the independent counsel statute, which actually was authorized by Congress, it contemplates an appointment as a putative inferior officer of a non-governmental official to an office that is fully the equivalent of a United States attorney. Okay, so it comes from these regulations, the CFR. But they say they can't do that, Janet. But only a statute, which is passed by Congress, not a regulation, is the kind of law that the Constitution says is valid, that can establish a federal office under the Appointments Clause. And currently, there is no statute that creates a special counsel with the jurisdiction and the authority that Smith wields. So, if Congress wanted a special counsel or an independent counsel, they could have done it. They could have reauthorized this independent counsel thing, and they didn't do it. So Reno just kind of shifted it, right? Well, we're losing that. We really want this. So she just recreated it and changed the regulations, changed the rules. And they've been living on that ever since. Nobody's challenged it. So Reno and her regulations, the Reno regs, they cite these other authorities, 301, 509, 510, and these through 519, and so on. And in his order, when Merrick Garland came out and said that Jack Smith does have this authority, he relied on those too. He put out his document and he said, we have a power to do this by 509, 510, 515, and 533. But unfortunately for Merrick, these statutes, says former AG, and he's telling this to SCOTUS, they're busted. These statutes, singly or collectively, they provide no such authority to allow Jack Smith to exist. Now, in his response, Jack Smith is whining again. He drops a footnote claiming that the plain vanilla language of 28 U.S. Code 518A authorizes him to prosecute Trump. Now, he says, that's Jack Smith hiding quite an elephant in that mouse hole. For the reasons that follow, Smith must be an officer to lead this prosecution. He cannot be an employee. But the fact remains that Congress created no such office, and 518 does not confer office-making power. Sorry, Jack. They continue telling SCOTUS, all right, Your Honor. They say, first, let's go through the different law that Jack Smith cites and explain why he's dead wrong on them all. First, Section 301. This is pretty obvious. This is a general authorization for issuance of regulations by the AG. They said that the AG, the head, may prescribe regulations for the government. It's a housekeeping provision. This provision doesn't create any offices or authorize the creation of any offices. Indeed, if it did, if it were a general office creation, authorization to create offices, the entirety of the more numerous specific provisions would then be superfluous. Okay, if you just got it from 301, then you wouldn't need any of the other statutes. It obviously doesn't do that. It's regulations. Now, second, Section 509, it says that all functions of other officers of the DOJ are vested in the AG. Now, rather than authorize the creation of offices, it says the AG can control his subordinates. So why did Merrick Garland put that in there? or that Merrick Garland can exercise their responsibilities. So it doesn't say that Jack Smith has the power to exist at all. Section 510 says the AG may from time to time make such provisions as he considers appropriate, authorizing the performance of any other officer, employee, or agency of any function. But here they say again, it provides for shifting authority among DOJ personnel, but it says nothing about who those people are or how they got there. Okay, they're saying, okay, yeah, sure. Like if you're an actual officer, you can move this around for you. Or if you're an actual employee, then that's great. Or if you're an actual agency, you can move performance, right, by any other, shift stuff around, change this, you're in charge here, you're hired, you're fired, whatever. But that doesn't create the office of the special counsel because of that power. And fourth, Garland also cites 515. And the Reno regulations relied on all of those from 515 to 519. They say, look, again, singly or alone, none of these provisions come even close to authorizing the creation of a special counsel or allows Merrick Garland to appoint a private citizen to that. 515A confers only the following power. It says the AG or any other officer in the DOJ or any attorney specifically appointed by the AG under law may, when specifically directed by the AG, conduct any kind of legal proceeding, whether or not he's a resident of the district in which the proceeding is brought. Sounds pretty broad. But thus, they say, this does not authorize creating any offices. Instead, it concerns the powers of those who are already appointed to offices under the law. So if it is created, then you can be appointed to it. But it doesn't allow you to create a new one. It allows the U.S. Attorney General to designate a U.S. attorney or a special attorney who is appointed under the law to prosecute a case, whether or not he's a resident. And so it's just a jurisdictional provision, and it doesn't give power to allow private citizens who are not appointed to be as special counsels. Section 515 doesn't give authority either. Each attorney specifically retained under the authority shall be commissioned as a special assistant. They say here, this does not grant any power to retain or hire new officers. It provides that attorneys that are already hired or retained and who may be only employees, not officers, can also have a title or salary. And to be sure about this, both provisions of the law assume that they are going to be attorneys specifically appointed by the AG under the law, which means something, right? It's got to be appointed under the law and specifically retained under the authority of the DOJ. And indeed, other provisions also authorize them to hire people as special assistants. But these provisions can confer no authority to create offices. And similarly, these other provisions concern the internal allocation of authority among existing DOJ personnel. Again, no power to create offices. No office creating power here either. And fifth, finally, they say this points to Section 519, noting that there are special attorneys appointed under other provisions of the title. But Section 543 is explicit authority to appoint special counsels. Yet saying like there are abilities to appoint special counsels. They say, yeah, you can. You can appoint a special counsel, but neither the Reno regulations nor the Garland memo that appoints Smith makes any mention of this provision because that provision does not authorize the kind of special counsel that was contemplated here. Instead, 543 is narrowly cabined, very narrowly cut off, as one would expect. The government has steadfastly for decades refused to rely on this provision that explicitly provides the Attorney General with hiring authority, and it continues to refuse to rely on it here for the obvious reason that the provision contains internal limitations which the government seeks to avoid. So if they use a provision that gives them some power, then they actually lose power. The text says, the Attorney General may appoint attorneys to assist U.S. attorneys when the public interest so requires, including the appointment of qualified tribal prosecutors and other qualified attorneys to assist prosecuting federal offenses in Indian country. Right? They like, darn it. So the one provision that gives them power to actually do this thing, they're grasping at straws to find, well, that kind of talks about hiring, so we'll use that. That says some regulations, so we have that. They call this sort of a penumbra of rights, the Supreme Court has said. When you have a bunch of these provisions that like kind of talk about it, but not really, you can kind of presume that there's a penumbra of rights. And they got a lot of our right to privacy in that context. Whether you think that's good jurisprudence or not, that's another conversation. But that's where they read it. You have a right, you have all these other rights in the Constitution, so there's kind of this implied right to privacy, which is why we have, rights to privacy with contraception and stuff like that. But they're trying to do the same thing here. Well, because these statutes kind of say we can hire people we want, create regulations to hire that, move work around, we can just create a special counsel. Well, there is another provision that says, here, you can absolutely create a special counsel for Indian affairs. Now, this is an obvious and explicit authorization. Like, that's exactly what they're looking for, but they just don't want that Indian affairs thing. Congress put that in there. Pesky Congress. So they could use that, and these people would merely, though, assist. Okay, see that word there? Assist U.S. attorneys, too. Just assist when public interest requires. That's not what they want. They want Jack Smith to run the whole thing. So there are, moreover, contexts in which the appointment of these people makes sense. Government often encounters problems where private lawyers have expertise. And you may not want a permanent government position. It's special, it's limited. An appointment as a special prosecutor under the control of a U.S. attorney is a win-win. But the problem for the government in the case of the Reno regulations and Jack Smith's appointments is that those regulations and the Smith appointment, they do not contemplate special counsels who assist U.S. attorneys. They contemplate a special counsel who replaces a U.S. attorney in specific cases. We know this about Jack. He was not appointed to assist a U.S. attorney. No, Jack was hired as a powerful standalone officer. Jack replaces, rather than assists, a U.S. attorney. This is precisely the role that the EGA previously authorized for independent counsels. Okay, we already had a law that says you could do that, but that statute no longer exists. Congress let it expire. And if we don't have a statute or a similar one, then there is no statutory authority of special counsel Smith to exist. He's not allowed to function as a stand-in for a U.S. attorney. Now, the rest of the law confirms this. This is a part of the law that deals with the FBI. It says the Attorney General may appoint officials to detect and prosecute crimes, to assist in the protection of the President, to assist in the protection of the AG, to conduct other investigations about official matters under the control of the AG, as may be directed by the AG. They say, okay, but that's not a general authorization to the AG to appoint officers. It specifically and solely authorizes the appointment of other officials, okay, not officers, other officials connected with the FBI. This does not include special counsel. We know this. Why? Different sections of this tell us. First of all, this deals with the FBI, okay? It's about investigating things, not prosecuting things. This concerns the FBI, not the AG. Section 533 also deals with FBI officials and agents, not special counsels. This is how the government has understood this provision. It's an FBI law, not a DOJ law. And the other law is about officials. It's not officers of the United States. They are non-officer employees. FBI agents, they're subject to supervision of officers of the United States. The FBI needs office and field personnel to do its job, and so that law allows the agency to have them. That's what it's for. But those personnel are not officers of the United States, and they don't get to prosecute people like special counsel. Now, to the contrary, the word officer is literally a constitutional term of art. They tried to shove Trump into that as the president, and we'll see what SCOTUS says about that for the ballot removal issue. Now, not only because it is used that way in the Appointments Clause, but also because Article 2, Section 4 allows for the impeachment and the removal, there you go, of all civil officers of the United States. Congress can try to impeach the Deputy Attorney General or the FBI Director, but no one thinks that Congress can go impeach DOJ trial attorneys or field personnel at the FBI. They impeach the officers. Now, what is more, officers can be put by Congress in the line of succession to the presidency. But no one thinks that the officials at the FBI or DOJ trial attorneys are going to be in the line of succession to the presidency. That is not how Congress was using the term. And third, and perhaps more tellingly, they say a cavalier reading of the law that Jack would be relying on to authorize his special counsel hiring, it is beyond its obvious scope. It obliterates the structure of the rest of the law. Now, that title is directed into different chapters. We got a chapter for the Attorney General, a chapter for the FBI, U.S. Attorneys, Marshal Service, U.S. Trustees, ATF, and so on. Wide-ranging special counsels like Smith are not part of the provisions outside of the law that has already expired. But at a more granular level, they tell the Supreme Court that if you have a loose reading of these statutes, the effect of this would even be more bizarre. Congress has provided for the Senate-confirmed presidential appointment of these people: Deputy AG, Associate AG, Solicitor General, 11 Assistant Attorneys General, plus assistants for each, and 1 U.S. Attorney for each judicial district, and there are 94. All of those people have to be appointed. Now, a reading of 533 to empower creating unlimited officers wreaks havoc on this structure. Like, we have articulated hiring allowances pursuant to Congress. So if the AG can just do whatever he wants, then what do we have all of that for? It would allow the Attorney General to appoint an entire shadow DOJ to replace the functions of every statutorily specified officer. No wonder the Reno regulations didn't use that provision in their argument. Now, moreover, for the reasons described in depth in other pages, the Supreme Court case from 1974 did not pass on the scope of that law. That decision is dictum, okay? It provides no weight. Anyone tempted to rely on Nixon should read the case brief, because that was not an issue there. Those issues involved only the relationship between the president and the DOJ as an institution. The same arguments would have been raised if Attorney General personally, rather than independent counsel, had brought the suit. So it's not about special counsel, the case. And Nixon was argued and decided before the modern rebirth of the Appointments Clause, and those dates are too close. So don't rely on that. It's bad case law. Now, in short, the position that supposedly held by Smith was, quote, not established by law. It's not established by law. The authority exercised by him as a so-called special counsel, it far exceeds the power exercisable by a mere employee. Jack is acting as an officer. But aside from the specific offices listed above, there is no office for him to hold. That alone robs him of the authority to represent the United States in any capacity, including before this court. They say, Your Honors, as they conclude their argument to the Supreme Court, he says the Appointments Clause establishes a default rule that all principal officers, if you're going to be a powerful officer, you got to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Saying even though existing statutes authorize appointments of standalone special counsels with the powers of a U.S. attorney, Smith was not properly appointed to such an office. You can do it, but you didn't do it here. No statute clearly authorized his appointment by any mode other than nomination by the president and confirmation by the Senate. There's no law. They just cobbled it together from a bunch of other provisions that, as we just read through, do not apply. Any such statute, of course, is governed by the Appointments Clause. The law has to be subordinate to the Appointments Clause unless it's a constitutional amendment, and it redoes that. And the Appointments Clause makes three things clear. One, the default mode of appointment of all officers is a presidential nomination and a Senate confirmation. Two, this default presumption can be overridden by Congress for inferior officers. Third, even then, Congress must clearly speak to authorize a permissible mode of appointment for those officers other than presidential nomination and Senate confirmation. So if Jack Smith was legitimate, he either would have been appointed by the Senate or he would have been relying on a law that allowed him to be appointed as an inferior officer, if you believe he's an inferior officer. And then that method of being appointed must be clear and come from Congress. You can't just cobble it together from regulations that Janet Rigo passed. They say this is called the clear statement rule. It's implicit in the Appointment Clause and in our constitutional structure. That clause is both a separation of powers and a federalism provision. It divides appointment power between the president and the Senate, not between the president and the Congress as a whole. The Senate is the body in which every state gets equal representation, and that guards against large state presidents underrepresenting smaller states in the executive and the judicial branches. These structural concerns warrant an interpretive presumption in favor of a clear statement of congressional intent to authorize appointment by any other means than a presidential nomination and a Senate confirmation. This is a major question, and you got to be clear about it in the law. And even without such a presumption, ordinary statutory interpretation, it demonstrates that the Attorney General had no power to appoint special counsel as inferior officers. None of the statutes canvassed in the previous section contain that authorization. In contrast, the DOJ's organic statute, the organic statutes in other cases, they do contain inferior officer appointment power clauses. So like when the DOJ is talking about investigating agriculture cases or education cases or health and human services, there are inferior officers that are articulated there. But Congress gave the Attorney General power to appoint such additional officers as he deems necessary, but only for the Bureau of Prisons, okay? Not for other DOJ components. The Congress set the limit. Congress's reasons here are unclear, but no one cares. It's irrelevant when statutes are unambiguous. Doesn't matter. They said you get it for this power, but not for the other stuff. Don't like it, take it up with Congress. Now, even if special counsels were statutorily authorized, they would need a presidential nomination and a Senate confirmation, and that did not happen here. If Jack Smith actually had the power to convene grand juries and to issue subpoenas and to direct and conduct prosecutions and to litigate in this court, he would obviously be an officer of the United States, okay? Because that's what attorneys do. That's what a U.S. attorney would do, and their subordinates would do that. He would not be a mere employee. Now, more than that, he would be a principal officer, and by the plain terms of the Appointments Clause, principal officers must be Senate confirmed. That is not how Smith was appointed, and thus he could not serve as special counsel even if a statutory position validly existed, because the mode of the appointment was not conducted appropriately. Special counsels that Janet Reno tried to cram through are equivalent to, if not even more powerful than U.S. attorneys. Now, it's obvious that U.S. attorneys are superior officers, and the same is true of the special counsels who mirror them. The only plausible argument to the contrary rests not on the meaning, but on a wild overreading of this court's prior decisions. And those decisions contain language that some lower courts have read to mean that anyone who had a superior on an agency must be an inferior officer. But if that were true, then the Solicitor General, even the Deputy AG, would be inferior officers because they answer to the AG. Could Congress therefore let the Attorney General appoint the Solicitor General? No, of course not. So, right, there's logical inconsistencies if you read it the other way. Wrapping up, they say, one can be a superior rather than an inferior officer in two ways. One is to have no decisional superior other than the president. Smith's court filings insist that he is independent from Merrick Garland. Now, he says, right, I don't report to anybody. And even the president assuring the courts that there is no coordination with the Biden administration. So he might be the most powerful man in America because he has all this power and he reports to no one, which includes Attorney General Garland and President Biden. They say coordination with Biden is non-existent. So he doesn't report to them at all. And he didn't get confirmed by Congress or by the Senate, and he wasn't appointed lawfully. He's just this random dude who just got a job. Smith, thus, he has no functional superior. Even they admit that, necessarily rendering him a principal officer, kind of like the president, I guess. And this lack of accountability only compounds the invalidity of his purported appointment. As Justice Souter wrote in another concurrence, having a superior officer is necessary for an inferior officer status, but it's not sufficient to establish it. Now, either way, if he is an officer, Smith is a principal officer. He has no superior supervisor or someone directing him, and Garland does not supervise or direct him, as he said he would not when Smith was even appointed. And so Smith is appearing in this court on behalf of the United States. He is prosecuting a former president, the first time that that's happened in our nation's history. Smith is purporting to exercise at least as much power as a U.S. attorney, and arguably even more. That is the hallmark of a superior or a principal officer. Now, the absence of such an appointment means that Smith lacks authority to prosecute Trump on behalf of the United States and Supreme Court. That alone is enough to grant a stay. They say Jack Smith is the classic emperor with no clothes. He has no more authority to represent the United States in this court or in the underlying prosecution than Patrick Mahomes, Kim Kardashian, or Mick Jagger. And therefore, the court should grant the stay. Yeah, and at least those other people have some talent, you know, and they've done something meaningful with their lives other than Jack Smith, whose sole claim to fame is getting overturned by the Supreme Court and prosecuting Trump. Great motion signed by Gene C. Scher, counsel of record out of Washington, D.C., Michael Boos, and David J. Giorgiani on behalf of former AG Edwin Meese and the law professors Calabresi and others, submitting this to the United States Supreme Court, asking them for a stay, saying Jack Smith is absolutely illegitimate. And Trump might be bringing this argument up in new filings very soon. So we'll see what SCOTUS does there and whether they grant the stay and how that unfolds. We had another response here from Brian Kemp, one of the more dumb responses on this immunity issue. And here is what he said when he was hanging out with Caitlin Collins over on Trump's immunity and whether it applies to him in the Supreme Court.
It is in the hands of the Supreme Court where it goes that he has broad immunity from being president and that he can't be prosecuted for anything he did while he was in office. I wonder what you make of that claim.
Well, listen, I don't think anybody's above the law, you know, a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, myself, or anybody else. So that's my personal opinion.
Do you think that those cases should go to trial before?
Dumbest answer ever, right? Sounds like Liz Cheney. No one's above the law. Did you read the brief? Do you know what's happening? Nobody's claiming that he's above the law, Brian. They're saying that the president has immunity, and if you're going to prosecute him, there are certain procedural hurdles you have to jump through that are in the Constitution for very good reason. So we don't have hack prosecutors like Fannie, who's in your jurisdiction, Brian, prosecuting people who are doing so because they're partisan hacks and trying to grift off their tax dollars off their constituents. The claim is that Trump was an insurrectionist. They impeached him and they tried to convict him in the Senate. They lost. That's it. Okay, that's the end of the story on that one. You don't then get to prosecute him for other things that are within the confines, within the outer bounds of his lawful duties. Otherwise, you have a separation of powers problem, and you have someone else who's in another branch saying that the president cannot do the president's constitutional obligations and duties. So no one is above the law. It's ridiculous, right? He sounds like Liz Cheney. Someone should give him a better line.
For the election, so voters can make a decision based off that?
Well, listen, I think most voters probably feel the same way I do. I mean, we're a country that was built on laws and the Constitution, and it's you know, up to us really as elected leaders to be the ones that exemplify that in a lot of ways.
All right, so you see a lot of people talking unintelligently about all of this. Now, we're going to see what the Supreme Court does on this. I still think that the Supreme Court is going to find that there is presidential immunity because there clearly is, and to hold otherwise would be insane. So Ed Meese says Jack Smith needs to go. We don't even need to get to the immunity issue because Jack Smith is illegitimate. And of course, my friends, we're going to be here continuing to cover all the developments in SCOTUS, in the January 6th case, in the classified documents case, the Alvin Bragg prosecution, and all the rest of them. And so when there are updates here, we'll be here covering them. I hope you join us as we do. Thank you so much for subscribing, for liking this video, for sharing it with a friend or family member. Tell them we're covering all the Trump trials, and so they can also come here and understand what's going on out there. We also have some great links in the description below. We got amazing events coming up in the rest of February at watcherlodge.com. We've got Build Your Food Supply coming up, Zen Wellness for Politics coming up. We'd love to see you over there and back here on the next one. All right, my friends. So that is what's happening in D.C. Now, let's talk about what's happening in Florida because Trump is getting ready to drop the mother load. Trump's defense team prepares to drop the mother load of documents, some people saying maybe 10, maybe more, of some major substantive motions in the classified documents case. We're going to see what Trump submitted before the filings drop. We're waiting for them, and when they come, we're going to be very excited to cover them here in depth. Ooh, I can't wait. Like Christmas. And so we're going to read through what they're asking Judge Cannon for permission to do. We're going to see some reaction about this new Trump hoax that's coming up, classified documents, Trump, Putin. We're on season 3 of Trump-Russian collusion. First 2 seasons were terrible, but they can't let it go. And we'll hear what Nancy Mace says about these 2 tiers of justice that are currently evolving all around us. But let's go to Florida. Judge Cannon's courtroom. Donald Trump and his defense team, they send this in, the West Palm Beach Division, United States of America versus Donald Trump. Judge Cannon presiding. They say, all right, Judge Cannon, we're here asking for permission for leave to file a big fat consolidated brief. Here's what's coming. They say, President Trump, Your Honor, respectfully submits this motion for leave to file a consolidated brief in support of his pretrial motions that aggregates the page limits under the local rules. We got page limits, And we also want to submit an unredacted version of the consolidated brief to the court and to the council by email on the night of February 22nd. That's soon. Woo, I can't wait. With a hard copy of the February 22nd submission to be filed temporarily under seal with the clerk of the court on February 23rd. And then we want to file a redacted version of the consolidated brief on the public docket on the night of February 22nd, which will allow additional time to address any sealing applications by special counsel's office relating to discovery materials and other potentially sensitive issues that are going to be dropped in that brief. So there's a lot of spicy stuff. This is the classified documents case. They say we're going to drop the mother load here very soon. And we want to know how you want us to do it, Judge. They say the special counsel's office consents to Trump's motion for permission to file a consolidated brief, and they take no position on the request about temporary sealing and redaction. So in other words, Judge, we'll leave it up to you. Now, Trump consents to the office of Jack filing a consolidated brief in opposition to our motion, as long as you give him the same page limits that we get. Walt, Nada, and Carlos, they also plan to prepare additional pretrial motions in other separate briefs. So things are getting juicy in Florida. Now they say on February 22nd, 2024, President Donald Trump, he intends to file at least 10 pretrial motions. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. Man, I'm about to do a backflip like Steve Sadow in the Fannie Willis hearing. Concerning, for example, here we go, the appointment of Jack Smith. Oh, shout out to Edwin Meese. And we just read that in our prior segment. So Jack Smith may be illegally appointed, unconstitutional, in fact, under the appointments clause. And so we're going to get that one dropped. They're also going to talk about presidential immunity. Now, presidential immunity is currently at the Supreme Court right now from January 6th and Judge Chutkan. But again, what happens if we have a circuit split here? What happens if they file this with Cannon and she says, I actually think there is presidential immunity. That's what I'm going to hold in my courtroom. I know it's pending appeal, and I know that we're waiting for ruling from SCOTUS, but I am not Judge Chutkan. I'll hear your argument. I'll say, yeah, maybe Jack Smith is illegitimate. Presidential immunity. Sorry, you got it. Sorry, Jack. The Presidential Records Act, saying that the documents weren't even illegal in the first place. They were Trump's records. Just like Clinton had his records under the Presidential Records Act when he claimed them. They also are bringing up selective and vindictive prosecution. Judge Chutkan doesn't care about any of that. Oh no, Jack Smith's my BFF. He's doing an amazing job. But what's Cannon going to say? How about the unconstitutional vagueness of 18 U.S. Code 793E? They're also going to bring up due process violations. Boom, love this. Prosecutorial misconduct, another one. Impermissible pre-indictment delay. You had all this evidence, and you could have indicted Trump, but you waited all the way until election season, and you tried to aggressively minimize his rights because he's in the middle of a campaign, and you're trampling over his rights intentionally, right? Prosecutorial misconduct, due process violations. We can't even see the evidence that you're alleging against us. The illegal raid at Mar-a-Lago, which should have never been conducted because Trump was cooperating with them. He was saying hello to the FBI agents who were there surveilling their residence. He's like, oh, let's get them some lemonade, thinking that they're cooperating. And they're like, perfect. Oh, illegal lemonade too. Also, improper violations of Trump's attorney-client privilege, where Jack Smith was taking people back over to Washington, D.C. to use their grand jury to find evidence in Florida. Why? Why is he going outside of Florida's jurisdiction to bring his case? So they've got a lot that's being dropped, and I'm pretty excited about it. Now, similar to the motions to compel, for the sake of efficiency, and in order to avoid requiring separate filings for each motion, President Trump respectfully requests permission to file a single consolidated brief in support of his pretrial motions, not to exceed the 200 pages in aggregate that are contemplated by the local rules for these motions. Whew! We might have to have 2 shows for that. Now, the president anticipates that such a consolidated brief will be shorter than the aggregated page limit, but is seeking permission for that page limit in an abundance of caution as counsel finalizes the motion in the coming days. Now, Trump's pretrial motions will discuss and attach discovery materials that were covered by the protective order, love that, which the special counsel's office may regard as sensitive or worthy of sealing. We want to see it. Now, accordingly, Trump also requests permission to submit an unredacted version of the consolidated brief via email and all counsel on the night of Friday, 22nd. And we also want to file a hard copy of the unredacted consolidated brief temporarily under seal with the clerk on the 23rd. Now, finally, because of the pending motion for reconsideration concerning sealing by Jack Smith's office, which we read previously, Trump also further requests permission to file a redacted consolidated brief on the public docket on the night of the 22nd, along with redactions that comply with the local rules. Can we do this, please, Judge? Thank you very much. Signed by Todd Blanche and Christopher Keese out of Florida. And while we're here, let's take a quick look and see if there was an update from the court, and we'll take a look at the Florida docket to see if there was a new order and ruling from the judge. And doesn't look like we have much. There's a paperless order. Let me check one other location and see what this says. Here we go. Here is a new order from Judge Cannon. Now, they say denying in part with instructions. They say Trump's motion for leave to file. They say all pretrial motions shall be filed on an individual basis to permit clear adjudication of the issues. So already ruled, says Trump, don't file a big fat document, okay? Separate them out, which I actually prefer. Further, all pretrial motions shall state with particularity the filing party's position on the need for a hearing on the motion. If the hearing is requested, how much time do we need? The court hereby enlarges the page limit to 25 double-spaced pages exclusive of attachment. Now, with respect to Trump's request to publicly file the redacted versions, the court denies that request without prejudice and orders as follows. On or before February 22nd, Trump shall submit via email unredacted copies with attachments. Following the conferral, parties will confer, talk about redactions. Following the referrals, any party that wants to seek redactions, okay, so will not get them on or before the 27th. Consolidated oppositions are due before 29th. Pretrial motions that do not implicate sealing shall be filed publicly on the 22nd. Okay, so we might get something on the 22nd, but maybe not, right? The government's probably going to want to ask for some redactions and for some seals. And we'll see what drops and when. Another order came out saying that there is going to be another hearing. So Judge Cannon scheduled an ex parte follow-up hearing, and going to be meeting with Donald Trump on the 23rd as well. Defense theories are going to be discussed about SEPA challenges, 30 minutes time, no classified information to be referenced, and so a follow-up hearing with Trump's counsel on the classified documents saga. And so we cannot wait until those filings drop. We're going to be here covering them, my friends. Hopefully you're subscribing and joining us as we do. But let's talk about national security, right? These are classified documents, and we know that there's this new meme going around, but it's not a new meme. It's an old meme. It's Trump is Putin, essentially. And so they're dragging this one out of the dumpster for season 3, recycling all the same characters. And they're now saying that Trump, in addition to stealing classified documents and charging him with crimes, they're saying the entire GOP is now being used by Putin, right? And this was always the end game, to use the national security state to go after Trump and to weaponize the government against not only Trump, but the rest of the entire party, right? Everyone, which is why we got so sick of tired of hearing people like Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and others just ignore the DOJ issue entirely. Just forget about it and say that this was something that they were going to wait and see what the DOJ did with Trump, right? It's always been a political attack. And now they're escalating it because their candidate can't talk. So Dan Goldman came out and he said this when he was on CNN. He says, you know, Putin might have control of the Republicans and the GOP, and they all are agents of them. And so we're going to weaponize the intelligence agencies against Trump, the GOP, anybody on the right.
Not only is there no evidence of any wrongdoing by President Biden, but it now appears as if the House Republican majority is being used by Russia to interfere in the 2024 election on behalf of Donald Trump.
Wow.
If they continue with this investigation, they are simply doing the work of Vladimir Putin to help Donald Trump win an election in November. That's where we are.
Okay, so the GOP are now colluding with Russia. So is Trump-Russia collusion? Russians hacked the election. Hillary Clinton says she had it stolen from her, all the things. Now we're doing this all again, where now the GOP is working with the Russians. Now, a lot of us are, of course, not buying anything, right? They indicted the guy who fingered Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and they're telling us it's all this Russian collusion operation. And we all know that you never should believe anything from the DOJ anyways, right? Them hiring an informant, paying him a lot of money for many years, allowing him to commit criminality, to commit illegalities, and then indicting him, and then him saying Russia, right? Nobody believes anything that they're doing. Why would anybody trust David Weiss, the same guy who tried to not charge Hunter Biden in the first place, to now suddenly be honest when he's indicting apparently somebody who's bad for the Biden administration? Okay, nobody believes it at all. And so we all just say hoax, 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 because that's exactly what it is. But apparently that's getting under Raskin's skin. He doesn't like it.
This is all part of a propaganda and disinformation campaign by Russia attempting to help Donald Trump.
Russia, again.
You know, when we point out the very clear contours of this story, our colleagues just start chanting Russia hoax, Russia hoax.
It is.
Well, what's the hoax? Is it the brutal invasion of Ukraine and the tens of thousands of Ukrainians who've died, or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Russians who've died? Is it the death of Navalny that's the hoax? What exactly is the hoax they're talking about? Because it seems to me that the most likely hoax is really Donald Trump, who's been manipulated by Putin for a long time, or is certainly in love with Vladimir Putin.
See, that's the hoax. You just nailed it, Jamie. You just answered your own question. The hoax is that Putin has control of Trump, like you guys keep saying. So what is the hoax? That's the hoax. It's the hoax that there was Russia collusion between General Flynn and the Viselyak phone call back during 2016. It's the hoax that the Russians interfered in the election and stole it and gave it to Hillary Clinton. There was like 2 Facebook posts with some terrible, get out the vote stuff from like Russia, hackers or whatever. Ridiculous. That's the hoax, Jamie. You know what it is. So they're out there. He's like literally answering his own question. What's the hoax? What's the hoax? You guys have been the hoax the entire time. Nobody trusts the DOJ on anything. So here is Nancy Mace. She comes out and is very clear about this, saying there are 2 tiers of justice here. And here is what she sounded like in response to some of those others in the House.
As you look down the road past South Carolina for the president.
I'm not at all. What the American people are seeing and what I hear on the ground here in South Carolina is they see a 2-tiered system of justice, a double standard, one for Donald Trump and one for everybody else. And that's why you're seeing the enthusiasm ratchet up in the wake of this election on Saturday. And
are you concerned at all as you look down the road?
All right, so they're in South Carolina, and we're seeing that there is a lot of effort to bring back this Russia meme. We're waiting for Donald Trump to drop the knowledge on the court in Judge Cannon's courtroom to show us what other avenues they're going to be pursuing to dismiss this case, resolve this case, disqualify Jack Smith. show that there was a vindictive prosecution here, that these people are all making it up yet again. And we're going to be here as these drop. Thank you, my friends, for joining. Thanks for subscribing wherever you're watching this. We got some great links down in the description below. WatcherLodge.com. We've got free events coming up in February. We'd love to see you there. Come and join us at WatcherLodge.com. RobertGouveia.com is where you'll find the PDFs if you want to download those. And of course, we'll look forward to seeing you there and back here on the next one. All right, my friends. Now, we've got one final segment on the day. And so let's just get right to it, shall we? We've got Letitia in the house. Letitia James is now threatening to take Trump's property if he doesn't pay his bill. The same bill that came from Judge Engoron after a show trial with Letitia James, sitting in the back pew, not actually doing any work, just sitting there observing. But what happened was $450 million got assessed to Trump. Not even any time has been allotted for him to appeal this. He's got a very limited amount of time before he's got to secure the funds, post the bond, and get it done immediately within 30 days. And if he doesn't, Tish says she's just going to go take his property, which is crazy because I thought we lived in a country where we did not have our buildings seized by tyrannical maniacs, but apparently that's changing rapidly. And ABC News sat down with her. I am not going to play her because we do not have the tolerance for that. But Tishy says, I'm ready to seize Trump's property if he can't pay his fraud fine of $354 million, which is insane. And we're going to hear Kevin O'Leary rage about this in a minute. But 4 days, okay, after they ordered almost $500 million in fines, she told ABC News that we're prepared to seize Trump's assets. If he does not have the funds to pay off his judgment, then we're going to seek judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we're going to ask the judge to seize his assets, she said in an interview that will spare our earballs. Trump was fined $354.8 million plus $100 million in interest, and the former president has denied all wrongdoing. But she says, Trump says he's very confident, but Tishy says we are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at Wall Street each and every day. She directly countered Trump's allegation that there were no victims. She said financial fraud are not victimless crimes. He engaged in a massive amount of fraud that had no victims. Okay, it wasn't just a simple mistake. There are variations are wildly exaggerated, and the fraud was staggering. Okay, who lost money, though? If average New Yorkers went into a bank and submitted false documents, he didn't. They were statements of financial condition. They were subjective statements with a disclaimer on it. The government would throw the book at him. No, they wouldn't. And she says Wall Street's doing fine, right? They're wondering if there's going to be a mass exodus of business. And she says, last I checked, tourism is up. Yeah, tourism from what? Guatemala? Is that what you're talking about? From Honduras? Yeah, you do have a lot of tourists there. Okay, nicely done. So that is Tishy Letitia. And that's what they do, right? They just seize property. They're communists. They just destroy things. What's yours is now theirs. We will hear these people cry foul about Putin, right? About how he seizes buildings and seizes property and he's a dictator. And the city of New York, the state of New York, is about to steal buildings from Donald Trump because he did business in the state. It's insane. But Trump's lawyers are now asking for the judge essentially to reconsider. They sent this in. They said, look, you did not, Judge Engoron, follow the rules before you issued your order. They sent this one in February 21st to Judge Engoron, a.k.a. Areola, a.k.a. the Nip. He said, all right, Judge Engoron, we write on behalf of all defendants here in response to the Attorney General's improper and unilateral submission of a proposed judgment when they sent that in to you on February 20th, 2024. Now, she apparently sent this in at 5:21, the proposed judgment, which incredibly states that it is on motion of Letitia James, on motion. But it fails to provide any notice whatsoever to us, and it deprived the defendants, Trump, of an opportunity to be heard before the judgment is entered. Okay, so the judge issued a ruling, then there's a proposed form of judgment. She submitted her response, and they're saying, we didn't get to submit our take on this. You just accepted hers without our input. Now, as set forth below, Trump respectfully requests that the court set a return date for the proposed judgment that actually affords Trump sufficient time to submit a proposed counter judgment. Like, you should hear from both sides before you just act. Now, as the Court of Appeals explained, the appropriate procedural mechanism for submitting a judgment to the clerk of the court for more complicated dispositions like these, where we have follow-up procedures, is a directive to settle order. Now, because the decision ordinarily entails more complicated relief, the instruction contemplates notice to the opponent so that both parties may either agree or have counter proposals and settle this. But your court decision and order that was dated on February 16th, it directed the clerk of the court to just enter judgment. Didn't even hear from us. Notwithstanding, the Attorney General has now taken it upon herself to submit a proposed judgment to the clerk, again, without notice to Trump and without conferring with his counsel, clearly hoping the clerk will issue the proposed judgment before Trump even has a chance to review it. So she's just, in other words, she submitted it, enter this, and didn't even tell Trump. They're scammers, let alone submit a proposed counter judgment. This conduct not only violates your decision, but it's clearly designed and intended to prejudice Trump. Now, given the Attorney General's submission, that's Tishy, of the proposed order and the fact that the February 16th decision entails a more complicated relief, including restraints and follow-up procedures, Trump now submit that the appropriate procedural mechanism for submitting a judgment to the clerk is a directive to settle order. So Trump therefore requests the court set a return date for the proposed judgment that actually allows Trump sufficient time to submit a counter judgment. To deprive Trump of the opportunity to submit the proposed counter judgment would be contrary to the fundamental fairness and due process under the law. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Do you think we could be involved at all in the trial? Can we please participate since you know you're billing us a half bill? Signed by Clifford S. Robert on behalf of Donald Trump into Judge Engoron. We'll see what he says. So we have more reaction. Earlier this week in the aftermath of the verdict, Kevin O'Leary was very upset about it. He obviously is in New York, does a bunch of business there. And he posted yet another conversation. This came clipped over via Kanakawa the Great, shout out. And this was an exchange with O'Leary over on Fox Business. I mean, he was fired up. Here's what he said, saying all businesses are going to have to reconsider what they're doing in New York, where you can just do business normally, have a subjective value of your financial condition, proffer that to a very sophisticated bank who does their own due diligence, comes to their conclusion on what the numbers are. You come to terms, they make money, you get the loan, you're happy, everyone's happy. You have some psycho who runs for office who has a specific stated mission of destroying you. She gets elected and then proceeds to destroy you. How is that conducive to business in America? Kevin O'Leary says it's not.
Just leaving the whole Trump thing out of it and seeing what occurred here, and I'm no different than any other investor. I'm shocked at this. I can't even understand or fathom the decision at all. There's no rationale for it. And so let me give you a real-time experience I'm having regarding this, and I'm not the only one. It doesn't matter what the governor says. New York was already a loser state. Like California is a loser state. There are many loser states because of policy, high taxes, uncompetitive regulation. It was already on the top of the list of being a loser state. I would never invest in New York now, and I'm not the only person saying that. And here's a real-time situation. In development in real estate right now, the hottest asset class is very high-end data centers. They cost anywhere from $2.5 to $3.5 billion each. They're very expensive. They require low power. You need permits. But most of the major institutions in the world need more data centers, and that's why developers like me are doing this. Now, you need power. So New York has Niagara Falls. Normally, you'd consider that to put in one of these facilities, create 400 jobs, 5 more jobs for each of one of those for auxiliary services. I can't go to New York. So I'm going to Oklahoma, North
Nice.
Dakota, West Virginia. Governor Stitt, Kevin Stitt, my staff have met with him. Governor Bergen, the same thing. Governor Justice. Those are winner states. They don't do things like this. I have to syndicate that debt and all that equity. We're talking billions of dollars here. Do you think any foreign institution or any private equity firm or any pension fund would touch New York? No. And that's why New Yorkers should be concerned. The fine people of New York should ask themselves, why are we such a loser state? How are we going to attract business? It's not just the existing businesses that are fleeing out to Texas and Florida. What about new money like this that I'm talking about, like a $4 billion data center? Not a chance I would put that in New York. Zero probability, never. And so they've got a lot of work to do to find themselves getting out of this situation. This has all occurred post-pandemic. Winner states versus loser states. Look at Tennessee right now, fastest growing city in America, Nashville. Winner state, good policy, competitive taxes. You've got to start thinking about this in the context of winners and losers. New York, mega loser state.
Nice.
So, Kevin, what did you think of Governor Hochul saying this is like a unique one and done because Donald Trump went too far?
They always say that, right? They're always only going to use their power to go after Trump, but they're not, J6 is never going to happen again. And we're not going to impeach someone else, or we're not going to blame someone else of Russia collusion. It's all fake, right? It's like, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle. And they have broken glass in case of emergency. And you don't go back from that, right? To try to cover this up and say, we promise we're not going to do it again. No one believes that for a second.
It was so nefarious. You guys, if you're just doing what you should be doing, you have nothing to worry about. But they're very worried about it.
Yeah, we're very worried. Every investor's worried because where is the victim? Who lost money? This is some arbitrary decision a judge made. This policy and what this says, what does this say about the bar, the legal bar?
It's a joke, okay? You can just do whatever you want. They're also captured in these states. Like, they're okay with this. They're perfectly okay with Tishy because the law is being used to further their ends.
In New York, aren't they going to question this judge?
Where are the other lawyers also, by the way? Like, there's a bunch of other lawyers who are just sitting around just saying, I guess this is normal. It's like that dog meme, right? Where he's in that building and it's burning down with that cup of coffee. He's like, this is all fine, I guess. The court systems are not following the law, right? They're all being exploited by people to go after their political opponents. And it makes me sick as somebody who loves the law and wanted my whole life to be about the law and justice, really, freedom and justice. And the law is being perverted to go against that, right? It's actually enabling state communists to go and steal property from people and imprison their political opponents.
What is this? $355 million, and there's dollars as a penalty, and there's plus interest at 9%, and there's no victim? I mean, I'm sorry, her words fall on deaf ears to everybody. There's nothing she can say to justify this decision. And this has nothing to do with Trump. Nothing to do with Trump. Forget about Trump. This is not a Trump situation. This is a New York problem now. The whole world is looking at this saying, what are you doing to yourselves?
Yeah, it's bad. And it's going to, I think, ultimately in the long term, contribute to the great self-sort, and I think this is going to accelerate that. I think people are going to recognize that your private property, it's not really your private property anymore. It's kind of whatever prosecutor decides to run against you and steal it from you. And if that is how the constituency is going to vote, if you're living in a blue state and they'll just steal it from you, then that's that. And our government has already been on this train for a while. They took all the Russian assets. They just started taking people's yachts. That's our yacht now. We go, that's really weird, because I thought we were a country that had principles about private property and about equal protection under the law and about due process under the law. And we didn't have a partisan politicization of the law. All of that is now gone. And people will resort, right? And I do believe Kevin O'Leary when he says, I'm done with New York, because the last thing you want is to be a businessman like Trump, come out on the wrong side of a Tish or a Fannie and have your entire empire ripped away from you. So with all of this going on, my friends, I know it can feel deflating. I know it can feel like it's overwhelming. It can feel like, my gosh, these little communist dictators are winning everywhere we look, but they're not. I think that all of this is just, they're sowing the seeds of their own destruction. There's only so many buildings you can steal from people who produce stuff. There's only so much power you can gobble up before the actual people say, we've had enough of your insanity and leave. And so the man himself who is facing all of this, he has a very nice message as we close out this segment. He says, you know, what are we going to do here? How are we going to enact our revenge? What are we going to do to bring this all correct and to right all of these wrongs? All we're going to do is win. Our success will be our revenge.
My revenge will be success.
Yeah! Let's go!
You told Maria Bartiromo that you may campaign in the Bronx or at Madison Square Garden. When might that be happening?
Very soon. Look, we have 9 months yet, but I'm going to see about Madison Square Garden, and we're going to go to the South Bronx, and we're going to go to Queens and other areas, because if you look at what's happened in New York, I'm not even blaming the mayor. I think the mayor has sort of been told to take a back seat a little bit because they came after him violently. You know, they came after him like they're going to indict him when he started speaking up, and now he's become quiet.
Yeah, because it's all part of the operation. And I have no doubt there are many good people in New York who are also tired of this. And so hopefully they also stand up and they say, what the heck is happening to our country? The man who built some of the biggest, best buildings in New York City, some of the most iconic buildings, who was there after 9/11, you know, standing on the street, all this stuff, like an icon of New York, they just say to themselves, we're going to rip his property down. We're going to rip it all away. Why would anybody build another building in New York ever again? Maybe they won't. And so hopefully the people of New York recognize what's going on and they speak out in force, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. Fortunately, Donald Trump is unflappable, and he's like, well, we'll just win harder. How about that? Save America that way. And so we're going to be here, my friends, continuing to cover this case and all the rest of the Trump prosecutions. Thanks for subscribing and joining us. Thanks for liking this video. Thank you for inviting a friend or someone you know. Come over here, check this out, and so they can join us as we go through all of this. We got great links in the description below. Would love to see you at watcherlodge.com because we've got amazing free events coming up. We're talking about building your food sovereignty supply. We're talking about getting zened out with political Zen wellness. A lot of other fun things, all free. Come check it out, watcherlodge.com, and we'll see you back here on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, that is it for us on the day. We covered some good ground. Letitia is trying to steal Trump's property and his money. We've got Trump preparing a major motions drop, and that should be out this week. Probably get to some of that maybe Friday, which will be fun. And we also had Jack Smith's newest disqualification filing from our friends Ed Meese, former AG, and law professors to the United States Supreme Court. And we're excited to see what happens there. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. And of course, as soon as we're done here, we are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have a members only after party we do every day after the show. We do streams in the morning where we talk about a bunch of other stuff that we can't get to here, things like the election, things like Joe Biden and all of the other congressional affairs that are happening. We do streams on Saturday, and we have the best dang community at Locals ever, and handsome too. And so we'd love to see you over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Now, this morning, I missed a message on our super chat from our friend Jay Water, Road Less Wolf. He asked this morning. Sorry, Jay, that I missed this morning. Says, do you report on local, non-political court cases where judges are unjustly taking away people's rights? Not regularly, Jay Water. Unfortunately, there's a lot of those. And, you know, we talk about the stuff that is kind of national story, right? The stuff that I think most people are interested in. Not that that's not interesting, but in general, we just don't. So it's a great question. Hopefully that's not happening to you, my friend, but I have an unfortunate feeling that it is. So I hope you're doing well, my friend, but I do hope you talk about it. And if you want to send me a message about that, please feel free to email me. And I hope you're good, Jay Water. Thanks for the message. B-Man says, okay, Trump has a civil trial starting on Friday in D.C. in front of the same judge that Rudy was before when 2 election workers from Georgia sued him and got $148 million. Why didn't they sue him in Georgia? That's a good question, B-Man. I haven't been following that one. So let me know what case that is, and maybe I'll take a look at it. Maybe we can cover some of what's going on there, but I wasn't aware of that one. We haven't really been following that one. So good to know. Thank you for that, B-Man. We got this one from Chief Tony. What's up, Chief Tony? Coming in as a new member. Very grateful to have you. And new YouTube members, remember, you can grab the Telegram link. You're just going to go over to the YouTube channel homepage, Robert Gouveia, click Community, scroll down, grab the private Telegram link. We'll see you there in the after party. We got this one from Rivka, the Jade Gamer. Says, I insist that Tish needs to prosecute all of Trump's co-conspirators in his fraud case. You know, the bankers that gave him the loans too. Yeah, like Deutsche Bank, right? Go after them if they're so criminal. Although I think she says that they were victims, although they say that we weren't. We made money. He was a whale client. We wanted more business with him. Anyways, shout out to our friends on Rumble. We got Angry Bell Sprout. Says, any consequences for Stormy's NDA being violated? That's a good question. That's a good question. I think you're talking about maybe in the Alvin Bragg case or consequences in general. I mean, I think she had to pay Trump's legal fees, right? Didn't she? Didn't she get stuck for legal fees? So I think she's had some consequences from the Trump litigation. And yeah, I thought she got ordered to pay like substantial fees. I could be wrong about that. Hey, what's up? Ryan Patrick's in the house. Shout out to our friend Ryan Patrick, who swings on by from time to time. Good to see you, Ryan. And says, smash that like button, baby. Ryan's also over on YouTube. Nice to see you, Ryan. Thanks for swinging by. Glocky's here. Glocky McGlock says, just remember, Democrats want everything to be a disability. Now, not understanding English is a disability. Remember this when you have to defend your family or your business from an illegal alien. Here well, I think they're also like running our elections now, right? An illegal alien accused of causing Sergeant Michael Kunovich's death files a civil rights lawsuit claiming his limited English skills make him disabled. That's why he had to kill a cop, because he didn't understand. Got it. Ike's Girl says, that's our country, man. Ike's Girl says, property to pay or use for illegal immigrants? There's a lot of that. Yeah, I think you're maybe talking about Tish. There's a lot of that going on in New York for sure. Glocky says, can Trump file an emergency petition with SCOTUS to stop the New York trial until his case is heard at the appeals court? He could. I don't know that would be the right way to go. I think he'd probably find an appealable issue at the Manhattan court level and then take it up from there. But I mean, he always could. Like, you could always just file an emergency petition to SCOTUS. Whether they grant it or not, I don't think that that's likely. But Angry Bellsprout says, oh yeah, did you ever play Tishy's Too Male, Too Pale, and Too Stale rally from when she was running for office? Yeah, we played that montage here. Has Trump ever asked about a civil rights race violation? Well, no. I mean, I think that only applies to non-white people. Trump's a white guy, so it doesn't count. In my view, says, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back. And here you go. We got a full GIF in the house. Good to see you on that one. That is from In My View with a nice GIF. Tony Hay is bringing in new membos. Thank you, Tony. We got 5 new membos coming in. The Antikiss says, hey, it's the Munkets. We got Nana B is coming in. We got Jay Thomas in the house. We got Mima got a gift. Randall H. and Robert the Great. Ooh, that's cool. Coming in courtesy of Tony Hay Munkets, bringing in our newest of membos. Glocky's on Locals says, I want to know how much the government paid for Jack Smith's residence here since they had to move him from overseas to America to persecute Trump. And does he take the DOJ's private plane back and forth to D.C. and Florida? And what is his per diem? And does he use a government phone? And if he does, do those records have to be kept in accordance with federal record laws? And is it possible to fire a FOIA request for that? Most of that would not be accessible. Most of that would be his work product and stuff like that. But other things might be part of public records. And we know his budget, for example. Like, his budget is huge. He spent millions of dollars. Like, I think the last time we looked at the numbers, it was like 10x that of Robert Hur. So, for example, Jack would be spending $600,000. I'm sorry, $6 million. Robert Hur was spending $600,000 for their prosecutions. That's how this worked out. Rocky says, you know, I hate to say this, but against my better judgment, I'm getting that optimistic feeling again. Uh-oh, careful. Says, the level of judicial corruption is becoming so undeniable. We might have the best opportunity to make real, serious, lasting improvements to the judicial system in the coming years. Rocky, I think it's such a good point, man. And honestly, I got to tell you, like, I don't know that anybody else could do this other than Trump. Could anyone else take on like all these criminal attacks, financial attacks, like $500 million and survive it, right? Just wake up the next day and say, what are we doing today? So you need something like that to really expose all of this. Like, he's going through the gauntlet and you get to watch all these monstrous people come out as he's going through. You go, whoa, this is disgusting. But no one else could really I think, have the fortifications, the fortitude to handle it all. So he's really doing our system a service by exposing all of these people. Like, they're all popping up and they're breaking glass in case of emergency, and we're watching them break it. We're like, whoa, don't break that. We don't need to use that. And they're like, yes, we do. Rah! Smashing everything. And it's exposing them. And they think that they're winning, but I don't think they recognize the long-term consequences of what they're doing. And they have a bad pattern of this, right? They just don't understand the consequences of what they do. They're kind of dumb that way. Like, they're like, we're going to like be not racist, and we're going to fix the border. Border's a disaster. You know, we're going to pick an issue, whatever it is. We're going to support Ukraine, right? We're now like on the brink of World War III. Like, they're just idiots. And when they make these changes, like, we're taking out Trump, there are going to be reverberations that their feeble brains can't recognize that are going to come back and impact the citizens, right? And impact their future cities. So it's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting. Not going to be good for those living in those blue locations. So I think it might be, you know, fruitful to think about that. I know I am. We got, and Arizona is like on the brink too. We got Milo says Attorney General Merrick Garland has appointed 3 special counsels: Robert Hur to investigate Joe, David Weiss to investigate Hunter, and Jack Smith to investigate Trump and his efforts to hang on to power and the handling of classified documents. What qualifies the other 2? Well, they were both appointed U.S. attorneys. Robert Hur was a U.S. attorney. David Weiss was a U.S. attorney. So they were lawfully appointed, and then they were confirmed by the Senate. That's why they were there. Now, David Weiss was a joke because he was already investigating Hunter, and they just appointed him to be the special counsel. And we said, that doesn't make any sense. He's not like independent at all. He was already doing it, and you just made him special counsel. So it didn't change anything other than his status, essentially. So, but at least they were appointed, right, by the president. They were confirmed. They are confirmed by the Senate. And Jack Smith was not. We got Tony. Hey, what's up, Tony? Been a membo for 10 months, my friends. That's a baby and then some. Says, I want to thank Robert. Your knowledge of the law is awesome. It truly helps me. And I love you and the chat. And I consider you all my friends. And God bless, bro. Tony, right back at you, my friend. I really do mean that. Thank you for joining us. I love you back. And we all consider you our friend. And thank you for being here. And you're, you know, a very generous friend. You bring a lot of people in to our community as membos, and we're really grateful for that. So, Tony, thanks for joining us, man. And I hope you continue to do so. It's going to be a wild couple decades here. We got a long road ahead. It's going to be amazing. So continue to join us. We'll look forward to it. We got Tech Phone. What's up, Tech Phone? No question on this one, but a very nice dono on the day with the number 3. 3rd super chat on a live stream. Very cool. Thank you for that. Tech Phone in the house. Another one from Tony Hay Munkets. Shaolin F is coming in. Solo Ones. We got Nick B's in the house. Mark K and Diana F all coming in courtesy of Tony Hay Munkets, our friend out there. Thank you, Tony. And welcome aboard. Paul M says, this is fantastic. AG Meese must watch your show and saw my recent question as to when the Meese brief will be considered. Exactly, Paul. I know that. So thank you for that follow-up. Yeah, there were some questions on this. Like, is anyone going to bring this up? Apparently they are. So it's good to see it come through. It's a great issue. I want to see it. I want to see this issue resolved. And I'm glad that Trump's team is going to be filing it. We got, what's up, Paul? We got Show Bizzle in the house. Says, I was wondering, Rob, was there a certain time that you personally recall when you thought something is going really wrong in our government? I would love to know your thoughts on this. Well, I mean, the whole show, watching The Watchers was started out of COVID. So in March of 2020, I recognized that something was very wrong at that moment. And the show was born, basically. And it was born out of necessity because I was doing a bunch of public speaking back then. I was freaked out. We were going to lose our law firm and all the things. And so I started thinking about how can I still do the stuff that I'm already doing, but at a different scale. And I was outraged by what we were seeing because I saw them calling for lockdowns. And I'm thinking to myself, that's weird. Like, we have clients in custody. So they want us to not work, but I've got clients who are in jail who they don't have the same benefit of just not working. So the courts shut down, everything shut down. And I was like, okay, we have a bunch of people that we're responsible for to make sure that they don't get dumped all over, whether they're in jail or not. They don't deserve to die. They didn't get sentenced to death. And so like all the courts and everything was like, it was mad. I was furious. I was outraged. A bunch of other attorneys, were just like, we have to lock down. We're all going to die. I'm like, you guys are pathetic. We have our clients in jail. We do something about this. And anyways, so at that moment, and the reaction to this, like what I saw from my fellow citizens and what I saw happening around us, I realized that things were very, very far off and they should not be this way. And so that's how it started, man. And we've never stopped. So we've been here ever since and just covering the law, the news, our tyrannical government, covering all the things that they try to strip from us. And we're not stopping, right? We're not stopping. We're just warming up. So good to see you, Showbizzle. Thanks for the great question and the trip down memory lane. We got Tara says, off topic, but here's some questions about Fannie and Wade. He didn't spend nights or travel with her until 2022 because he didn't file for divorce until November 21. He had to go home every night. Till then, it wasn't just to do with the Rona. Good comment on that, Tara. Yeah, and they got their timeline lined up pretty well, but I don't think anybody really believes them. They hooked up at that judicial conference with their robes. We know it. MJ's in the house. MJ's in the house. Welcome aboard, our newest supporter. So grateful to have you, MJ. We got Tara says, any new filings in Georgia? Read the in-camera. Not that I saw today. I checked the usual locations today. Didn't see anything. I'm waiting for the new deadline to drop. When's the hearing? Is the hearing on Friday? Come on, let's get closings. All right, we got Pinochet says, anyone consider the illegitimate appointment is on purpose? We know the UK, NATO, UN, EU, they all had agents working through CETL for the 16 and 2020 elections. Yeah, that's also interesting, Pinochet. Like, did they select Jack Smith for some reason? Like, they know this guy, they know, he's like a foreign agent, in other words. Great question. Cowboy Rob says, Trump Vivek 2024. I think it'd be a good pick. I happen to like Vivek. He's pretty dang convincing. We got Cowboy Rob says, do you think Letitia James could try to interpret campaigning in New York as conducting business in New York and try to bust Trump for that? Probably. Yeah, I mean, getting a loan in New York was also criminal, apparently. And she is stealing his property as a result of that. So she'll basically do anything. And Engoron will allow it because these people are monsters. Knox is here, defense attorney in Texas, says, happy Wednesday, all. My day was a grueling nightmare. I just waiting for Vlad to get home and cook some borscht now that I'm a Ruski, Russian. Yeah. Well, hopefully you have some potato vodka too, as well, Knox, whatever the memes are over there, because all the Russians are communists and we don't want communists here in America. That's for sure. Good to see you, Knox. Hopefully you have a beautiful night enjoying your Russian commie food. Cowboy Rob is here, says, I have to correct you. His name is Raskin. Oh, Jamie Raskin. Sorry about that. Yeah, I get that wrong sometimes. Pinochet says, whoa, I went home with a waitress the way I always do. That's interesting. Smooth operator. How was I to know? She was with the Russians too. Now I'm hiding in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. Send lawyers, guns, and money. The ish has hit the fan. It's a poem. It's a poem. I went home with, is this a poem or a song? I went home with a waitress the way I always do. How was I to know? She was a Russian too. Now I'm hiding in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. Send lawyers, guns, and money. The ish has hit the fan. Nice poem, Pinochet. We got this one from Vitorn. Says, I find it highly suspect that Trump's lawyers didn't know Smith was illegally hired. I think they were saving that argument for any appeals if convicted. Yeah, they might have been saving it, putting it in their back pocket, but I'm glad they're using it. I can't wait to see what happens with it. We got Show Bizzle in the house. Says, the Democrats don't realize how sloppy their game looks to most people. They aren't even good at it. It looks like sore losers, man. And I think people in general hate sore losers. They hate cheaters. People hate bullies, right? We don't like bullies, naturally. We don't like cheaters. We don't like people who take advantage of other people and exploit their position of power to go after people who don't have it. That's just a human thing, I think. For most people, maybe it's not a thing anymore. That's kind of how I thought that humanity was naturally programmed. And so, no matter what you think about Trump, I mean, as long as you're not like a TDS infected person, of which there are many, they don't care. But for normal, reasonable people, you don't want them to take away, to eliminate like, this is politics, I get it, but do you want to eliminate everything about him? That's what they want to do. And I think that when people watch them doing that, they recoil. They say, all right, that's even a little bit too much for me. Because the government can do it to you. If they can do it to Trump, they can do it to you. And I don't want our government to be able to do that to anybody. I want fair process for all, everyone, including Trump. Now, this one is from Sandy, says, people are talking about a bond or the full amount in cash for Trump. Why are they ignoring Trump could get a letter of credit from a bank to secure the judgment for a nominal fee? Well, they want liquid cash. So, I mean, they'd have to, it's not just credit. I mean, they'd have to move the funds over. So I'm sure he could do that, right? If he could get a loan for that or something, but they want that money in escrow, like they want it held in custody. So however he needs to do that, I think is what they're working on. Jeremiah's here, says, thanks for another great stream, Rob. Today, my mom is learning the magic of Big Beautiful Spotlight. Oh, it's coming up soon. Shout out to my mom, Amy. Hi, Mom. What's up, Mama Amy? Mama Amy in the house. Very good to see you. Welcome aboard. We're going to get to the Big Beautiful Spotlight here in a minute. I'll try to make it a good one today so I don't disappoint. But shout out to Jeremiah's mom in the house. We love when it's a family affair. It's great to have you both here. Hopefully you're having a beautiful Wednesday. And Jeremiah, don't forget to call your mother. All right. Truth is here. Truth sets us free. This is a free esoteric PDF. World Teacher for All Humanity. It's written by Benjamin Cream, with a bunch of other names in there like Buddha, Messiah, love, not religious, easy to find. And that is from Truth Sets Us Free. WT's, AKA Imam Mahdi and other things. Christ is in there. Interesting comment. Thank you, Truth, for that. Milo says, under Judge Engoron's ruling, will used cars have to be bought and sold at Blue Book value? Milo Phone Bill. What's up, Milo Phone Bill? Thanks for the correction. Milo Phone Bill. I think I'll be able to remember that. We'll see. Says, well, they all have to be sold at Blue Book value. Yeah, and if you don't, you're going to get indicted by Fannie, by Tishy. I get all the Tishies and Fannies confused, you know. It's complicated. Quarter Native says, why they keep putting honorable before Engoron's name is beyond me. He has no honor to speak of. Well, that's why they put it up there, you know. If you don't say it, he's like, I am honorable, you know. I am. Write my name, put it in there. But I am honorable. Okay, just put it in there. He won't shut up unless you put it in there. NY says, so the NY governor and Letitia James, they give a great argument for a bill of attainder, coordination in RICO. They colluded to change the law for Trump's assault case to start. And that statement that it's an isolated case, it's just Trump, it means it's literally vindictive prosecution. And the same thing they accused Trump of doing for Georgia is true in spades. Yeah, if we had an actual functional government there. We have this one. Good to see you. Quarter Natives here says, did you hear that the Attorney General of Illinois is talking ish about going after KFC from leaving Chicago? Listen when people tell you who they are. It's amazing. So Chicago's, you know, Illinois is going through a bunch of stuff. I think the mayor of Chicago is also really struggling. Like a lot of people are in way over their heads, big time. We got Milo Phone Bill says, under Engoron's ruling, will homes and all commercial properties have to be bought and sold at tax assessment value? I don't know. You certainly don't want a subjective interpretation of that. So the tax assessor will set the sales price, not the market. In Fannie's world, maybe she'll set the market. We got NY says, hey, Quarter Native, you know, it's racist for them to go against KFC. And for the governor to say that, I mean, it's bad. Okay. Yeah. Going after KFC. Yeah, it's bad. Bad news. Stephen is here. What's up, Stephen E? Says, when she locked eyes with Nathan, Fannie's hormones began to percolate. She was percolating up there, wasn't she? She was percolating. She's like, we'll be friends forever. He's a great man. Oh, gosh, Fannie. Get a room again. This time, go back to Norway. SD 1985 says, trouble understanding political speech versus slander. Accusing people of working with Putin in treason without proof sounds more like slander. Yeah, you could make that argument. I mean, I don't even know what they're talking about. You know, Trump is beholden to Putin. We played a clip, I think, this morning, Jen Psaki, or maybe that was yesterday, talking with Nancy Pelosi about Putin. Like it's just conjecture. They're just making it up out of thin air. And it's really Gross behavior, but that's the Democrats for you. Adam M. has been a member for 8 months on the program. Adam, 1 more month, and we got a new baby in the house. We're waiting for it. Says, could one address a judge as dear unhonorable? Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to get reprimanded, you certainly could. Maybe it's worth it. You never know. Hey, we got this one from B-Man. Says, blessing game versus Trump. Blessing game versus Trump is the name of the civil trial. Very cool. Thank you for that. And this one from Knox. Yeah, here's a Babylon Bee story. Did you guys see this? Apparently President Xi from China has been appointed to lead our elections. Did you notice that? San Francisco appointed him. Here you go. Yeah, President Xi has been appointed to serve on San Francisco elections. That's courtesy of the Babylon Bee. Doing great reporting over there, as per usual. We got some more coming in. Thank you, my friends. Dan is gifting 5 new membos. Just Call Me Jay is here. Karen H, Donna O, we got Narsos is coming in, and Fizbin G, all in the house, courtesy of Dan, our newest membos. Thank you, Dan, for bringing in new membos. Cowboy Rob says, Supreme Court Justice Robert Govea. Ooh, that has a nice ring to it. Man, I'd have to write much more goodly, to get on the Supreme Court. I have to learn to write more goodly. But I'll do it, man. I'll do it to save America. We'll do it. Who would I replace? Sotomayor? I'll take it. All right. Gordon B is here. Says, can DJT declare a national emergency and stay another term to clean the swamp? No. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. If he wins 2024, as Zelensky did, and the swamp has no issue with it, I see where you're going. Okay. Well, hey, why doesn't Trump just be like Zelensky? Yeah, he can just suspend, going to church, and he can just force you to be conscripted, and he can, eliminate free speech and all the things. And then we'll say he's a hero of democracy and Putin's a communist. Okay. We got Liberium is in the house. Says, I am a Hispanic Latino who proudly supports President Trump, Robert, and I'm also a huge fan of yours, and I will never support the Democrats. Man, it's good to see you, Liberium X. Man, shout out to our Hispanic Latinos who support Trump. And I'm a huge fan of you, Liberium. I appreciate you being here. Neither will I. We're not going to support him. We got this one from Dolphin Fan is the man, bringing in 5 new membos. We got 5 new membos coming in. Thank you, Dolphin Fan, bringing in. Aubrey in the house. We got his servant is coming in. We got Bruce Wayne, Batman. We got Shepard is here, and Audra de Leon is joining us. And Vientica says, Hamaste. Very peaceful. Knox says, OMG, Rob is too young to know Warren Zevon. Yeah, I don't know who that is at all. Never heard of him. Was that the poem that I read? Object Class Keeter says, okay, Goldman or Schiff or Raskin is the new Joseph McCarthy in a new wave of the Red Scare. But now it's Russia. Everyone is just a Putin, shill when we question our government. Oh, you love Putin, huh? Knox shared this one. It's the YouTube over to Warren Zevon. 1980 song, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. Yeah, I wasn't even born yet. Not even around. We got Orion is here. What's up? Orion Starman says, whatever happened to that 70-year-old rancher who shot an illegal alien? Great question. That is George Allen Kelly. And I got another question on that one from locals yesterday. So I got to look that up. And we'll see if there'll be a good update on that one. Is he rescheduled for trial? Is it still on appeal? I'll look it up. That's the second question I've got. It's an important case, and I need to look it up. So I'll do it. Thank you, Orion. Pinochet says, nah, I'm not artistic. Just an autistic ex-Intel type. LOL, every time some crazy lefty accuses me of towing Putin's line, the Warren Zevon song, Lawyers, Guns, and Money plays in my head, and I move on. That's a good solution. Okay, these people are whacked. Just have a nice mantra in your head and get on with it. Good to see you. We got Sandy says, a letter of credit is a promise to loan if necessary. A bank says, this guy is good for the money, but if not, I'll pay the judgment. Meanwhile, they have signed loan docs to be executed if the client loses the appeal. I dealt with this and the bank paid me in the end. Well, I mean, if the judge will accept it, I think they could probably negotiate whatever they wanted as long as the judge is okay with it, which is really what I think Trump was saying in that response. You guys entered a judgment without consulting me. We'd like to partake in that. So please, can we, work with you to get this stuff sorted out, however they do it. As long as the judge is okay, it'll be satisfied. Cowboy Rob says, will it be the same way when selling your used car? Yeah, they'll have to run it by Tish to see if she's okay with it. We got Paul M says, who knew John Galt was the orange man? Connecting the dots one at a time. Who is John Galt? Who is John Galt? Oversold says, I like turtles. Turtles are pretty great animals, actually. You know, they're very self-sufficient. They're kind of slow, but they preserve energy well. They have a nice shell so that they can protect themselves. Very self-contained, very impressive animals. I agree. We got Milo Phone Bill. Says, in a world of unlimited appointments by the Department of Justice without Senate confirmation, why don't they just appoint a czar of equitable ice cream? Well, is that ice cream? Okay, we got multiple colors in there. I see a little bit of brown. It looks a little too vanilla, for the equitable ice cream division. That's might be illegal. We got, and that one from Milo. Yeah, definitely. Is that Nazi ice cream? Oh, great. Nazi ice cream? All right, so Milo Phone Bill, thank you for that one. Let's say hello to our friends on X before we go over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our members only after party. Who's joining us on the X platform? Who is here? We've got Elon is testing out Twitter. There he is. This is a test. This is the test of Elon's broadcast system. It's working, Elon. We see you. Come watch the show. All right, so who's joining us? 37 viewers? Oh my goodness. That's a lot. That's a lot more than usual. Let's see who's in the house. Paul Mino. We got, whack job. Oh, have you guys seen what the new definition of whack job is? Here it is. Paul looked it up. There it is. It's Tish. Yeah. Whack. Yeah, there it is. Whack job. That's her for sure. We got Vientica says, in relation to New York, a council tried to force us to sell our home so that we could fill it with asylum seekers. Yeah, and a lot of that happened in Cuba originally. Paul Mino says, it's always fun when you don't get the boomer memes. Good to see you, Paul. I don't know that song for sure. And Azok is here. V says, Russia is just confession through projection. Let's be honest. Danny McWilliams in the house. Vienticus is saying, hit the like button. Misty says, the locals chat is the best chat. Fred says, the Georgia article, the judge may strike all of Willis's father's testimony because he watched the trial. Yeah, could do that. I think he said he was going to take it into consideration, give it as much value as he thought it was appropriate for. Hey, UNC Tar Heel fan says, tour de force tonight, Govea. Thank you, sir. Cohen says, any updates on SCOTUS when they're going to rule on Colorado? No, we have no dates on that. There was a thought maybe that it would be released today. They were releasing some orders today, but that didn't happen today. Jen says, probably not going to happen. Wasn't the special counsels for both Russiagate and the investigation were appointed the same way? I think that they were actual U.S. attorneys. They were not private citizens. So that works. Like, you can be a U.S. attorney and be appointed, and that all works, but not just a private citizen who gets thrown over there. All right, so my friends, thanks for the great comments on X. If you want to follow us on X, it's at Rob Govea ESQ. Great place to follow other watchers out there, support their tweets, support their X's, and connect with them out there in the wild on the X platform. But that is it for us on the day. We are heading over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Our members only after party will be happening there. Before we wrap it up, want to say thank you to the mods and the meme smiths who make it all possible, keep things nice and beautiful and orderly around here. Our friends, the Antiques Prime, we got K Bean in the house. We got Just Cause, Playing Hooky, Ronnie Cole, Zulu's here, Beyond Geo, Zach Nichols, John Allen, Janek 909, Dog Digger in the house, along with Donut, Mind Me, all modding away and clipping for us. Very grateful to Donut and V and others for clipping today. This one came in from V. And from our friend Phil Swede, a membo for 3 months. Amazing, Phil. First month's the hardest. It gets easier from there. Praying for MAGA from Sweden. Man, we'll take it. Man, we'll take global prayers to help save our country. We need it. So thank you, Phil. Thanks for being here and being a membo. Sandy says, it's pronounced Warren Z. Vaughn. LOL, proof you're too young. That's definitely true. Warren Z. Vaughn in the house. He sounds like a good song. And Troublemaker says, please don't insult American hero McCarthy. Well, it is true. You do definitely want to get rid of the communists. Communists are the worst. They're the worst. They're insidious, man. You got to be careful with them. So, you know, McCarthy was a complicated man, no doubt about it. Okay, so thank you to the Meme Smiths, Sleepy Dog Lee, we saw him on X, Nathan N810 in the house, and our friend Geegum Geegum. And special shout out to our doc master Elliot in the house for helping us secure documents all the time. It's a lot of fun. But that, my friends, is it for us on the day. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our members only after party. And we would love to see you there. But if not, we're going to be back here tomorrow to get into it all again. And we're going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. See you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.